This video will deepen your appreciation of the preparation you're making to pass a licensure examination. You know, they say that when the why is big, the how is going to be easy. When the why is big enough, the how is going to be easy. Many people are preparing for the boards and are finding it very difficult. Many have been through a lot of preparations but end up not successful in their preparation. It's not because they don't know how, but they don't appreciate why. And in this video, I will deepen that perspective. I will shift your preparation for the board exam not only on how you will do it, but on why you will do it. Because there is always a danger that a lot of people and a lot of review centers are just so focused on making you familiar with the questions that would appear in the board exam, most likely to appear in the board exam. And then because you're familiar with the question, you're familiar with the right answer. That's going to be wrong. It will be wrong because you will be reviewing to the test. You should be reviewing to become the professionals you are and to become the best person you can be. Remember this. You are like applying to join a community of professionals. And the key for you to be able to enter the door is for you to prove that you have what it takes to become a professional. And that's why you have to understand why are the regulatory bodies appointed by the government. That is so that they can make sure that those people whom they will give the privilege to become professional will be there serving the public, and the public is safe from that service. And that's why without that license, you cannot practice the profession. Let's put it this way. Okay. Let's illustrate it this way. Okay. Because you want to be a professional, you need to perform a role. And by becoming a professional, you will assume a role. If you're a teacher, you have a role in the classroom. If you're a nurse, you have a role in the hospital. If you're a doctor, you have a role in the hospital, in the clinics. If you're an engineer, you have the role in construction, in building, in finding solutions. And together with that role comes the responsibility. And this is why, once you are given the license, you are not given the right to practice the role. You are given the privilege to practice the role because you have the responsibility, and the state, the country, the government has the responsibility to protect its people. And as a professional, you have a responsibility to prove that you are a safe nurse, you're a safe doctor, you're a safe professional at that. Okay, and therefore, they establish what you call standards. Okay? The standards are minimum basis of performance. Expect that when you are given the standards, you can always go higher than the standards, but you cannot be lower than that standards. The standards will actually promote the practice. It will guide the professionals. Okay? And the standards will also direct the professionals, okay, and the public, the academe, what do you teach? You teach the standards. Okay, the public, what do you expect from these professionals that they're able to perform it based on the standards? Even the board examiners, they will use the standards. Do you have at least the minimum capacity to perform that role and perform that responsibility? And which is why the board exam will be very keen at seeing your competencies. Okay, they would look into your competencies. You're being tested for the competencies. You're not being tested for your recall. You're not being tested for your memory. You're being tested for your competencies. And when you speak of competencies, you speak of the knowledge, the attitude, the skills, and the habits. Okay, that's why expect that in the board exam, you will not only be tested on your cognitive ability, you will not be only tested on your skills or your psychomotor ability. You will also be tested for your attitude, which is your affective abilities, including the habits that you may have that would affect your performance of actions. And therefore, if the competencies are there, competencies are just written things that would determine if you're capable of performing it. But you have to demonstrate that. And that's why there are things like indicators of performance. Okay, there should be indicators of performance. You should be able to prove it. Prove it to me. You're a good nurse? Prove it to me. You're a good doctor? Prove it to me. And as a person looking at you as a professional, I should be looking at the indicators of your performance. Okay? And that's why in the board exam, the core competencies are determined. The core competencies are connected to the standards. And the core competencies are demonstrated in the person's indicators of performance, so that these core competencies will give you the ability to perform the responsibility and the role as you are as professionals. I repeat, it is very, very dangerous if you are only preparing for the board exam and getting familiar with the questions that you're being asked. That will be very dangerous. Don't forget that responsibility sounds like accountability, and accountability sounds like losing your license, paying penalty, or even going to jail. And you don't want to put yourself in a situation that all you can do is to pass a test. When you are able to pass the test, make sure that you have the right competencies to demonstrate the standards so that you can perform your responsibilities and the roles. In this portion, I will discuss what you call the table of specification. The table of specification refers to the reference of the board in writing those questions that will be given to you in the licensure examination for teachers. Teachers know very well that the TOS identifies what should be asked, and the TOS becomes the outline, becomes the checklist, and the table of specification also becomes the basis for the construction of a test, so that the complete test will measure what you intend to measure. It becomes a valid test. It becomes a reliable test. Now, the general education is very critical for teachers for the elementary. Okay, for the elementary teachers, don't forget that about 60% of your test will actually come from professional education. Okay, 60% of the test will come from your ability to answer professional education questions. And don't forget that 40% would come from general education. And this is for the elementary teachers. But for the secondary teachers, of course, you have the third component of the test. You would have your majorship. And the division of the test will be something like this. Something like this. Okay. 40% will be your professional education. All right. And another 40% goes to your majorship or your specialization. And general education takes the 20%. All right? So that is your professional education. This is your majorship or your specialization. And this is now your general education. Okay. You have to make sure that you are prepared in all these areas. Otherwise, you are in danger of losing your investment on, if you are a specialist, if you are a secondary education major, and you're so good with math, but you neglect your English, then this 20% will pull you down. Or if you know how to perform mathematical operations, but wouldn't know how to teach it, and you lack the pedagogy to teach mathematics, then you would suffer from the 40% that would come from professional education. Now, for general education, I want to start with the general education, and you have to watch the next video, which is on professional education. For the specialization, there's a lot, and that's why you might as well just refer to the books that I have written. Okay. Now, for general education, okay, you will break down the general education into 6 parts. Okay. The first part is English. The second part will be Filipino. The third part is mathematics. Don't worry, we will go to the specifics of all these subject areas. Then after mathematics, you will talk about sciences. Okay? And of course, you wouldn't miss social sciences. And even prior to the pandemic, there was already a very high regard for ICT. Okay, so these are the 6 areas of general education that you may want to actually master and understand. Okay, now let's begin with English. You would notice that as a teacher, there's a very high regard for your ability to communicate because Filipino and English will contain a very high percentage. In fact, English takes 25%. Sorry, English takes, yes, 25%. Think about it. So if you're poor with English, you already lose 25%. So you can just catch up with 75% of all the rest. Okay? Now, if English takes 25%, Filipino takes 15%. So if you're weak in these 2 language areas, you can just imagine you're already losing, 40% of your test. All right. And mathematics, because mathematics is not just like being familiar with this mathematical procedure, but mathematics is actually what? It is actually critical thinking. It's problem solving, and it takes 20%. All right. We'll focus on this side first. Okay, with English, there's an importance given to the use of English. Okay, such use of English is taking a chunk into what they're testing you for. And when you speak of use, of course, you want to understand if you can actually write, you can speak English. As a teacher, you will be tested on whether you can use English, okay, in the way you think, in the way you write, the way you read, the way you speak. Okay, because, basically this is about communication. Are you able to comprehend? Your comprehension will be tested. Your ability to detect the mood of a line. You'll be given a line and you'll be asked, what is the mood? The subject-verb agreement, the is versus the was, the are and the where, and so on. Now, writing in the discipline will also be tested. You'll be tested on your linguistics, the difference between semantics, syntax, pragmatics. These will all be tested. The style, stylistics, the rhetorical devices. Remember those words like the assonance, the alliteration, and so on. Figures of speech. They're very, very keen as whether can the really teachers use figure speech. The difference between simile, metaphor, the hyperbole, personification, and so on. In academic writing, you will also be tested if you can identify errors in the academic writing, spelling, the modifiers, the parallelism, the use of comma, the use of semicolon, the use of the period. There are so many ways by which the board can check if you can evaluate academic writing. Now, with speech and oral communication, you'll be tested for your grammar, parts of speech. The use of in, on, at, that will be tested. Vocabulary words. How many new words have you learned every day so that you're preparing yourselves for the board exam? Don't just be familiar with those questions or those words that were asked before. You have to really enrich your vocabulary, not only for the test, but for your for your experience as a teacher. Of course, part of this speech and oral communication is communication processes itself. Do you understand the role of the sender and the receiver, the encoding, the decoding, the message, the feedback, all of these elements? Do you really understand these channels, the language, the paralanguage, the verbal versus nonverbal? You will be tested for this. And aside from this, in English, you will be tested for literature. You'll be tested for literature. And literature, you should be familiar with Filipino famous writers. Like, do you know Nick Joaquin? And do you know the influence of that Hispanic influence to him? The Jose Garcia. Okay, you want to find it out. And you have to be familiar with them. The famous writings like, who wrote Biyag ni Lamang? That these are all related to this, the literature. And the types of literature. What is a prose? What is a poetry? What are all of these? How are they different from each other? In English, you will be tested for this. And which is why you have 25% of the test expected to come from your ability to use English in communication and the depth of your knowledge in literature. And lastly, in English also, you have to learn the works of the masters. The works of the masters. Okay, the works of the masters. Of course, you have to be familiar with the epics, the collection of fables, the famous writers, for example, the William Shakespeare, the Edgar Allan Poe, and of course, the pen names. What's the pen name of Mark Twain? All of those. So it's not about the teleserye you're watching now. It's not about the Korean novela you're watching now. It's about how familiar have you been in the course of your study to understand the works of the world masters, the literature, and your ability to communicate. That's for English. After English, let's talk about the 15% component which is coming from Filipino. Siyempre, pasok na pasok dyan ang wika, ang panitikan, at ang masining na pamamahayag. Masining na pamamahayag. Alright. Sa usapang wika, hindi dito mawawala yung katangian ng wika, antas ng wika, ang variety ng wika, at maging ang teorya na pinagmukala ng mga wika. Hindi mawawala yon. Sa panitika naman, siyempre, hindi mawawala ang mga manunulat, ang ama ng Ilocanong panitikan. Siyempre, alam niyo yon. Dapat alam niyo kung sino siya. Ang sagisag ng panulat, ang Francisco Baltazar. Okay? Ang balagtas, ang balagtasan. Okay? Dapat kilala nyo ang tikbalang at kung ano-ano pa. At sa pag-usapan namang masining na pamamahayag, siyempre ang bahagi ng pananaliksik at ang nagagamit ng mga husay ng Pilipino sa pagbuo ng isang sulating pananaliksik or research at that. Okay, siyempre exciting of them all will be mathematics. Laki rin ang porsyento ng mathematics. Siyempre, ang mathematics, we will start with the fundamentals of math. The fundamentals of math. Okay. Siyempre, itetest dito kung naaalala nyo pa ang PEMDAS, the PEMDAS. Okay, it will be tested. Dito papasok yung mga concepts of divisibility rules, the LCM, the GCF, okay, the measurement of units and units of measure, the perimeter, area, volume, all of those, capacity, weight, conversion from metric system to other systems, convert units, importante yon, and even the operations of whole numbers, fractions, prime, composite, denominate numbers, etc. Hindi mawawala yon. Siyempre, papasok dyan ang plane geometry. Alright. Siyempre, pag pinag-usapan ng plane geometry, the lines, the curves, perpendicular, parallel lines, angles, angle proportion, special triangles, the quadrilaterals, the polygons, and siyempre problem solving using geometry. Okay. Siyempre, papasok din dito, hindi mawawala ang elementary algebra. Okay, the simple algebraic operation, hindi mawawala ang polynomials, linear expressions, linear inequalities. You will solve, evaluate, manipulate even the symbolic and numerical problems that will be given in algebra. At syempre, pasok din dito, and part of it will be research, statistics, and probability. Don't be surprised if you find here computations of mean, median, mode, which you don't only find in Prof Ed, but it may also be found in the discussion of statistics. Okay, after mathematics, of course, you will be tested for your ability to teach or ability to be a content provider for sciences. So, syempre, science nga takes around 20%. Okay? And that's why we have it here. Now, science, syempre, papasok dyan ang biological sciences. Okay. In biological sciences, syempre, papasok ang introduction to biology, papasok dyan ang genetics. Naintindihan mo ba siya? Okay, papasok dyan ang cell. Of course, cell, papasok na yung lahat ng levels of the cell biology, the microbiology. Okay, the parts of the cell, the microbiology, the theory of the microorganisms. Papasok ang evolution. Hindi nawawala lagi ang evolution. Charles Darwin and all those theories, teachers should be very familiar with that. Siyempre, kung merong related to anatomy, dapat alam natin ang anatomy and physiology, the functions and the parts of the human body. Okay, hindi mawawala yon. And ecology, chemistry. Right, it's really a very rich area of the test. There will be, expect physics there. I mean, in sciences in general, okay? That's sciences in general. Physics, chemistry, all right? Even earth science will be part of this. Okay. Now, in the area of sciences, you would have to be very rich with your bioscience, your physics, the chemistry, and all those related to sciences in general. Now, part of, as we go towards the last part, we'll talk about social science. Siyempre, kung social science, dapat alam na alam ng teacher ang Philippine government. The Philippine government, hindi mawawala yan, the Constitution. Okay, you should be very familiar with those. Also, the types of government. What types of government do we have? You have to be familiar with that. The types of the different branches of government, the executive, legislative, the judicial branches of government. Of course, papasok dito ang history. Okay, the history in general, Philippine history. Okay, the periods in Philippine history. At hindi mawawala ang heroes. Okay, the heroes of our history. Siyempre, hindi mawawala, ang importante dyan will be Rizal, Bonifacio, and the other heroes you can find in the textbook of history. Economics will be part of this. Okay, economics. Papasok din ang cooperatives, culture, society in general. It will be there in the board exam. Okay, the works of Rizal, the biography of Rizal, and other traits of the Filipino people, as a people, as a culture, as a society. And lastly, for social science, will be discussions on humanities. Art appreciation. Okay, because teachers should really be able to, facilitate the learning and appreciation of the arts, including, of course, philosophy and even psychology. The human behavior. All right. And last but not the least, there is also an added element of the ICT. ICT, the information, communication, technology, the use of computers, digital transformation, digitization, the fourth industrial revolution, all this technology we use for blended learning, etc. Although the most of that part will be found in the professional education. There should be some terminologies you have to be familiar with, like you know what URL means, you know what USB means, do you know what search engine is, Google, social network, apps. They even ask about what is a modem, what are all of these? What's the meaning of the triple W dot and the Facebook, social media, etc. That's in the language of the ICT. It's really how you have the functional knowledge for the use. And of course, the most important element of ICT will be the new intelligence that we're looking at humans, and that's the digital intelligence. I want you to appreciate all of these and to put summary into this discussion. Okay, a teacher should be able to have the content. The content knowledge will come from general education. The pedagogical knowledge will go to the professional education part. And therefore, if you're preparing for the board, you will not only enrich your English and the use, the thinking, the writing, and the speaking English, the literature, you're familiar with local and international, and the works of the masters, Shakespeare and the like. You will not only be good with Filipino, which is not actually Tagalog, but remember the mother tongue-based multilingual education. That's why we have to strengthen in this. Wika, panitikan, masining na pananalay, pamamahayag, no? It's how you communicate more in a very artistic form, in a scientific form. That's why even research is part of Filipino. Mathematics, to test your critical thinking, your ability to perform all of this. Financial literacy, all of this, converting peso to dollars, given the conversion rates, all of those, especially now that the teacher's exam is becoming more functional than ever. Of course, when you speak of science, a big chunk of the biological sciences, from the cell to the ecosystem, you have to be familiar with physics and chemistry and earth sciences even included. In social science, it's not only the government, the society, the branches of government, the basis of that government, which is the Philippine Constitution, the culture, and the way people think, and that psychology, the way people see perspectives, that's philosophy, history, how are we groomed to be who we are today based on the history that we have had in the past, and the story of our heroes, specifically Rizal. You have to be very familiar with it. Humanities, the appreciation of the arts, and economics, because we're social beings. We have to learn how to operate in that social context. If you're a teacher, if you're wanting to become a teacher, and you don't have this content listed right here behind me, then you may not deserve to become a teacher. If you're a teacher who speaks with full of grammatical errors and grammatical flaws, I would doubt if you can really teach. If you're a teacher who cannot compute the grades of your students, that's going to be a problem. If you're a teacher who do not understand the psychology of the child and the psychology of the society where the child evolves, then you might be in big trouble. So, even if this general education is only, 40% of the elementary education teachers and 20% of the professional education teachers, don't forget, it will make sense if you know all of these. You don't have to be the new Ernie Baron, or you don't have to be knowledgeable of everything, but at least focus on the essentials, because here the teachers are generalists. They should be able to know what you need to be in that classroom. And the warning is, if you don't have a very comprehensive knowledge about all of these, you will be humiliated when a simple child asks in front of everyone else in the classroom a question, and a teacher would just say, I don't know. And at this point in time, you have to prepare yourself so that not only because teachers should know everything, but teachers should know at least the basics of them all. And that's the competency being checked by the general education component of the licensure education, a licensure exam for teachers and for educators. Okay, in the next part, and you have to find this here in this channel. And by the way, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, because I will be providing you more inputs on how you will navigate not only the board exam, but your professional life your professional career because it only begins when you get that license. It's just the beginning of life. Don't forget to be lifelong learner. Subscribe to my channel. The next part of this will be the professional education, and I look forward to seeing you there. Don't miss the other content of this channel. God bless you. Keep safe.